Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technology Tuesday, presented by Out of the Box Technology. We're so excited that you've joined us today to learn about inventory management in QuickBooks and beyond. My name is Jennifer Darachuk. I will be your moderator today. If you have any questions as we go through the presentation about inventory management, you can use your question or chat function there on the GoToWebinar control panel and send that over, and we will be happy to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. A little bit about Out of the Box Technology. If you haven't joined us, or maybe it's been a little while, we are anything and everything QuickBooks, from training, integration, and support inside of QuickBooks to bookkeeping services, data migrations, and more. We have a whole team of experts that are here to help you. So again, today we are focusing on inventory management in QuickBooks and beyond, and I'm pleased to welcome back our esteemed presenter, Vicki Borrow. She is our Director of Data Services, and if you were with us last month, and I think even the month before, Vicki has become a familiar face on these Technology Tuesdays. She does a great job presenting and is just a wealth of knowledge, so we're happy to have her. And we also have one of her team members, Osita, who is going to give a little snippet at the end about some inventory options outside of QuickBooks. So really exciting about today's presentation. It is approved for continuing education, so you can earn 1 CPE credit if you are joining us live today. Unfortunately, if you're watching this on demand at a later date, we cannot offer at this time. But those of you who are watching live, you can earn that. So we'll have a couple of polls throughout the presentation today, and then a survey at the very end will be emailed to you. So be on the lookout for that. And some learning objectives for today's presentation before we dive in. Learning about practical ways to improve your overall inventory management, about an analytics around inventory and how to apply it in your operation, and truly understanding your inventory's profitability. So now, before I hand things over to Vicki to dive in, I'm going to launch our first poll and simply just asking the audience today how you're currently managing your inventory. So you can go ahead and answer any or all, or if you're not sure, but we'd love to hear what everyone is using for managing inventory, whether it's books, another third-party app, just pen and paper, or none of the above. You're just not sure. So I'll give a couple more seconds to answer that, and then I'll hand things over to Vicki. All right, it looks like a good majority of people have answered. And it looks like just about 75% are using QuickBooks, and a couple others are third-party apps and a little bit of Excel as well. So if that gives you just kind of a baseline, Vicki, for our audience today. But yeah, a good majority is using QuickBooks for inventory. So I'll go ahead and close that. And Vicki, I'll hand things over to you.
Okay, let's get this going here. And hang tight, I've got to switch my... All right, Jen, are we good?
Perfect, looks great.
All right, guys. All right, so as Jen said, my name is Vicki Bohr. I'm the Director of Data Services. I'm an accountant. I'm an Intuit Advanced Pro Advisor, and I'm also have taught at the university and community college level. So, whoops, hang on, sorry. For some reason that didn't want to go. There we go. So our talk today is about inventory, the monster that lives under all of our beds, right? Because it's that thing that it drives our business. It can cause a business to collapse. It can cause a business to do well. So managed correctly, inventory is the big thing. You need it to predict trends, buying cycles, obsolescence. Do you practice just in time? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and how QuickBooks can help that. The big thing that we run against all the time, is it really inventory? Do you purchase specifically for jobs? You may not want to track it as inventory, because if it's a very large job, you may not be able to get it out of inventory because QuickBooks requires that you invoice it to get it out of inventory. So which takes you to the next part. Will you be invoicing for these items to take out of inventory? Had a large client that did dairy parlors. You know, when you do a $500,000 contract, you're not going to invoice the client for every little piece. So there was things that had to be done about that. Do you have a POS system? A lot of the POS systems actually track the inventory and send journal entries to QuickBooks Financial to tell you basically the change in inventory, cost of goods sold type things. So don't be redundant and keep it in your QuickBooks file as well. Do you need to know the quantity on hand at all times? I've had beauty salons that we basically just count inventory at the end of the year because it's not large inventory. They can look at the shelf. They don't need to really know that. So ask yourself, is it really inventory? QuickBooks Inventory is available in all QuickBooks desktop versions at different varying levels, of course, and then it's available in the QBO Plus and Advanced. I'm going to be talking about QuickBooks Enterprise today because it has the most functionality. It's the most stable, works really well with the more other robust inventory systems, EDI systems, things like that. QuickBooks Inventory, while it's still young and coming up, it still is not quite as stable as I would like inventory platforms to be. If you've got a simple inventory, it's not too bad. But for most people, they end up going to Enterprise, and a lot of people end up turning on the advanced inventory option in Enterprise. So that's kind of where I'm going to be talking about today. QBO uses FIFO, so you have to also know your inventory costing method. So if you're going to use one of the QBO versions, you need to know that it will do first in, first out. That means whatever I bought first is going to be the cost of what I sell. Desktop uses average costing, so it's an average over time that it will keep track of. In Enterprise, you can turn on FIFO, but you need to be aware that it's not necessarily true FIFO in terms of reporting and knowing exactly what came in and out. So just have to be aware of some of the quirks that aren't part of the canned process on that. So when we talk about QuickBooks, we're going to talk about setting it up in basically the Enterprise version, but a lot of the same things applies. It has to be manually turned on in all versions. So you have to do that in your company preferences. And then QuickBooks Enterprise Advanced Inventory, it's an additional turn on that you have to do also in the preferences, and there's some options in there that I'll show you when we get into the actual QuickBooks in terms of that. The thing here is the most important setting. I'm in the preferences. I'm turning my items in inventory on. Remember, I'm in desktop. Notice, do not allow negative inventory or do not negative quantities. People don't even know that this exists, and they don't, so consequently it's not checked. I will tell you that I clean up all the time because people have gone negative inventory, and it will cause a major financial impact on your company, because think about the equation, and if you throw a negative in there, especially with average costing, you can have some really big problems. So you really need to make sure that you check this, don't allow negative quantities. You can overcome that by creating purchase orders that allows you then to invoice a client, excuse me, because, you know, just-in-time inventory, we're going to order it and basically sell it at the same time. But the most important setting, don't allow negative quantities. The second one, and I'll show you on the assemblies, is pending builds. Be very, very careful about that. So when you set up your inventory in QuickBooks, they need to be inventory item types. They're used on bills and invoices. Those are the two basic transactions in QuickBooks that add to your inventory and take away from your inventory. So you need to make sure that you're using items. Invoices require that, bills, a lot of people don't. If you were in my job costing last time, this is definitely really important. You need to use your items tab on your bills. So the three big pieces, well, actually two, one gets confused as inventory, and that's why I want to bring it up, is First and foremost, if your inventory is not turned on, you will not see inventory part or inventory assembly in your list. So if you don't see that for whatever reason, go into your preferences where I just was and make sure you turn that inventory on. So inventory part, you have to have that first. That has to be for every single thing that you keep in inventory. An inventory assembly is used when you make something, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a true make. It could be however you turn one piece of inventory into another. The key here is inventory assembly. It takes the inventory parts that are part of the bill of materials for an assembly, takes all of those individually out of inventory, makes the assembly, which in my demonstration, I'm going to talk about a chair. So in this case, it would take all of the individual pieces of that chair out of inventory and then puts that assembled chair back into inventory with any kind of burden costs on it that you want. And it becomes a new inventory item with a new inventory value. People get confused a lot and use group and think they're kind of doing an assembly. A group is just a way to let you sell a bundle of products. It is not a separate inventory part. So if I have a bundle of, in my example, I've got cushions and chair and cup coolers. Those are individual parts. I might just happen to sell them together at maybe a slightly discounted price. The cup holder and the cushion each come out of inventory when the group is sold. Nothing goes back into inventory as like an assembly does, and you don't have to pre-build groups. So I just want to make it very clear about that. The other thing that you're going to need, especially if you do assemblies, is you'll want the other charge. In my example, I'm going to show you some labor and screws being added to making my chair. So we're going to talk about that. So here's the setup for the inventory part. Make sure you pick the cost of goods sold account you want, the income account you want, and really, really importantly is if you are going to use something other than the default inventory asset account that QuickBooks creates when you turn inventory on, make sure you pick this. So in this case, I've got two inventory accounts. One's going to be for my materials, and I'm actually going to have another inventory account that's going to be for my finished good. So notice I switched screens. This is my my finished chair. So now I've got my chair here. I'm making a chair. Here's the bill of materials for it all. Same thing. I need a cost of goods sold account. I need an income account. And now whenever I add to or take away when I build a chair, that's going to actually be in my finished goods inventory so that I can distinguish it between my raw materials. Make sure you always do your builds, and I'm going to talk about that. QuickBooks will not automatically build a chair for you just because you sell it. So you actually have to go in and build your chairs just as like you are on the factory floor and add those into inventory into QuickBooks. And I'll show you how that works here in a second. And then the other part of this that's really important is I talked about the non-inventory part, and in this case I added screws. You have to make this two-sided because you have to have both the materials side and the sales side. You probably never will use the sales side, but QuickBooks wants you to make this two-sided when you do that. So this is going to be another piece of my assembly of my chair. The life cycle of inventory. You add to inventory with your bills or your checks, whatever you buy something for your purchased goods, that's how you add to the inventory. Assemblies also add to the inventory because remember what happens is these separate components come out of inventory and go back into inventory until they're sold. So that's the biggest way that you increase your inventory. So many times clients are complaining that their inventory is messed up because they will do a bill or a check and just debit the inventory asset account Yeah, that increases it financially, but that does nothing to add the individual components that you're purchasing into your inventory. You have to list them all out on the bill or the check and put in the quantities on that. Taking out of inventory. QuickBooks uses invoices and inventory adjustments. Now, inventory adjustments you can add to or take away from. I strongly discourage inventory adjustments unless you have things like spoilage or you're adjusting inventory account after a cycle count. There are ways to get inventory out, especially in a situation if it's a large project that you're not going to invoice the client for, but you need to get all the individual components out. I strongly recommend a zero invoice. That way the inventory cost is tagged to that customer and job. If you try and do an inventory adjustment, even though it asks for a customer on the screen, it doesn't necessarily tag it to that job. So want to talk about, making sure that you use the transactions in QuickBooks, knowing how they work correctly to accomplish the results that you want. Before we hop over to QuickBooks, I just want to talk about a few things on the advanced inventory options. So it's in Enterprise, you turn on the advanced inventory, and there's the FIFO option. There's warehouse management, which is really nice because you can turn on different warehouses and bins. So I've got clients that actually have different warehouses, but they really only have one, and they use it for tracking repairs. And I'll show you that, where you can actually create a warehouse where you bring a product in and move it through the repair cycle. And if a customer calls on that repair, you can immediately identify where it is because you've received it as an item with maybe a unique item or with a unique serial number, and you can track it back with that. You can do serial or lot tracking. You can't do both together. They've really enhanced the barcode scanning for receiving, picking, and now they've added the cycle counting on that, where you can buy the bigger scanners, and the guys can actually receive information on these scanners, and they're given a pick order, and they can just go through the warehouse picking those items off the pick order electronically on the scanner. There's a lot more reporting on the Enterprise Advanced Inventory, and you can actually add more preferred vendors. And this is a feature that is so underutilized in QuickBooks, where people don't fill in the preferred vendor on an item. Once you do that and you set your minimum quantity available, you can actually auto-generate purchase orders, and that's a big piece of that. So some other pieces on that. So Jen, I'm going to flip over to QuickBooks. Do you want to do the next question while I do that?
Absolutely. I will run the next question. Polling question. So let's launch this. And it is, what item type do you have to set up if you are going to use inventory? And our options are service, inventory part, non-inventory part, or other charge. So it looks like the votes are coming in unanimously as inventory part. I think that's what everyone is answering.
All right. People are paying attention so far, right?
Yeah, love it. I'll give just a couple more seconds for a few more people to have a chance to answer the poll, and then we will hop into QuickBooks with you. All right, so I will close the poll and let you take it away. And I see your QuickBooks screen, so everything's coming.
Awesome. All right, so I'm in the preferences screen. We talked about that you had to turn on the inventory. So once you click this button here, that's when you will see that you have the inventory options on there. A few other little things about QuickBooks, but there's the biggest thing right here is warn if not enough inventory, do not allow negative. Now, I'm going to go against what I'm preaching in the sample file just because I'm going to do things that they're easier to do if I can ignore the messages, but this is a big piece of that. Here's also your advanced inventory settings, and this is where you can enable your inventory sites, use your bins. I mean, I've physically gone to clients where we've taken one warehouse and put tape on the floor and turned that building into bins so that people knew exactly where things were. I had a guy who sold appliances, and everybody would just open the door and dump everything right inside the door. And then what would happen is he'd go to the back and he was finding, dishwashers and things that were a couple model years old because there was no organization to that inventory warehouse. So we divided the room up into cooktops and dishwashers and stoves and things like that so that they could basically do a FIFO and get rid of the things that they had bought first so that they didn't have that obsolescence. Here's also where you turn on serial numbers. And this is a big part, and it requires some discussion about where you want these serial numbers to be, because you have to be very careful on, and I would normally require it on purchase transactions, but for example purposes, I've got it turned off because this is really important for when you're receiving it. You need to clarify what serial numbers you are receiving and what serial numbers you have in inventory. So normally I would have all of these turned on, but because I'm making chairs, I have them turned on just for an example, but I don't want it to. And then you can also have it warn you, not to warn you. You can turn to FIFO. I would strongly recommend thinking about that. You can turn on barcodes. There's actually a wizard that will help you create the barcodes for that. This is the new site operations fulfillment that it was new with advanced inventory a few years ago. And there's also now a landed cost account, which I'm not going to talk about. We just don't have enough time, but we can always discuss that at a later time. So those are some things that you need to do on that. And then we have our item list. Keep in mind that any list screen is totally customizable by right-clicking, and you can customize the columns that you want to see. And so you may think that I have some magic here because mine doesn't look like yours. It's only because I customized what I wanted to see on this list. So I wanted to talk about the inventory assembly. This is where you name your assembly. And then this is the big key to this right here. This is where you build your chair. So all of these have to be created as individual items first. Notice that I added some labor. Again, that had to be its own item. Then I also added screws. So this chair takes 20 screws. So because I have these items set up, I have a cost associated with these items. This is going to be the cost. Now keep in mind, this is just my soft cost. These costs will come out of inventory at their average cost. So notice that because I was playing around and I wanted to show you guys that there is a distinct difference, is that this was my soft planning cost of 41, but as time, some of my components have increased in cost. So now my average cost to build this chair is 55 bucks. So I have to be careful because now I'm less than a 50% margin. So you just want to make sure you're paying attention to those things. And notice too that I have my assembled chair going to a different inventory site than my materials, or I should say account. That way I can actually value the two pieces of those separately. So those are some big pieces on that you want to be careful of and make sure your assemblies are set up correctly. Can't tell you how many times we get item lists in that have assemblies on them and have no bill of materials, and yet people are selling them. Can't tell you what that does to your financials and some of the other pieces on that. Real briefly, here's your inventory sites. I created warehouses for my different components. Here's bins. So I actually have a separate bin where my cup holders go, my cushions, because notice seats, cushions. I also have a salesman and I want to track what's in the trunk of his car. So I created him as a warehouse site so that I could make sure I knew what Joe should have when he is out on the road demoing my chairs. then this is what I talked about in terms of repairs. In this case, I only created one repair warehouse, but I created separate bins for that repair. And that's where then I could actually physically move the piece of inventory through an inventory adjustment or an inventory transfer, and track exactly where that was coming from. So I could always see then where a job is. So all I need to do, if I needed to move it along the line, is I can do an inventory transfer. And I'm going to say that I'm going to transfer from the repairs actually to repairs. And I don't know, and then you pick, so I was using a generic repair item, which I might have a serial number. So I could say that, all right, I have one in receiving, and then I'm going to, oops, that's my way here. Then I'm going to move it to to looking at. So now I could actually move that through and say, okay, now we're looking at it. And notice that I also had another bin there was waiting to ship. So I could be done with the chair and put it on that. So now it just moves that inventory along through the tracks in terms of being able to track it through repairs. Inventory center, there is a lot going on here and a lot to pay attention to. Again, you can customize this by right-clicking and adding what you want to see. I always take out the cost because I want to know quantity on hand when I'm dealing with inventory, because the other pieces are over here on the right. So there's no point in being redundant, except that quantity on hand. But notice there's a lot of information right here. In this case, for the arms, I've got 46 of them on hand, but I've got 30 that are on a pending build right now. So that tells me I only have 16 available. But also, notice that here on my legs, I've got 26 on hand. I've got 60 on a PO, and I have 60 reserved for an assembly. I don't have enough. So I'm 34 short. So I've just got it because I have not, and the reason I'm short is because it's on a PO. It hasn't been received yet. So that just some great information here. Shortcuts to a lot of the really cool reporting that's here, that you can go to from that. So go from there. Another big thing I want you to pay attention to is the home screen. A lot of people don't notice that these arrows actually have meaning until I point them out. So we can actually take the life cycle of a client in terms of what they want, so without having to click a whole lot. So in this case, I did a sales order for sales chair world, and they wanted 15 chairs. I clicked create a purchase order. Problem is I couldn't do that because the assembled chair requires too many other pieces. If it was a straight up inventory item, I could actually just click right on through. If I had set up my default vendor on my item list, which is right here. So I'm going to pick my seat. So I can pick my seat vendor as my default vendor, and I can also have a global reorder point so that when I get to a certain point, that I can do some automatic POs. So I've created the chair. I don't have enough. I would want to create a purchase orders then for all of the pieces that I need. By the way, if you click find and click find again, there are your purchase orders. So what I did then is I went in and made purchase orders for all of these pieces. And I actually tagged the customer chair world as a customer so that I could track it back to that order and that sales order. This one has been received in full and it's now closed. But I have other ones that may not be, like this legs, they're still waiting to be brought back in. So then from here, there is inventory receipt. a big thing I want to point out on inventory is, and you can't see it till the landed cost goes away. QuickBooks will create an item receipt for something, but when it is converted to a bill, the item receipt no longer exists. That can cause a problem with your inventory number. If something was received at the end of the month, it went into inventory as received, but then the bill is dated the 10th of the next month, and you turn that item receipt into a bill, which is the normal way QuickBooks works. It will take that inventory number out of the previous month and put it in as of the bill date, because the item receipt no longer exists because it has been converted to a bill. So this can cause some problems, especially if you close your month and your inventory number is changing on you from month to month. You can actually turn on this enhanced inventory receiving, and that will allow you to have item receipts and bills, and basically kind of creates kind of an inventory holding account from between the months. But that will enable you then to be able to keep your inventory separated between those months. So just kind of a warning there on that. When you get the inventory, you can then receive the inventory with the bill, which doesn't create an item receipt, or you can receive the item without the bill. What happens is when you receive it, you key in the vendor, and it will tell you that you have a purchase order, and you can say yes. You might have multiple ones. You just got to know which PO you're receiving against. This is the nice part about this. By doing the PO, is the person in accounts payable and in shipping don't necessarily have to know all the details, as long as they can match it up with the order. So you can say, okay, I've now got all the pieces I need in here. It's not going to be billable to Chairworld, so I'm going to say no. So now I can hit save and close. I've now, oops, see, you have to assign a location. So this is my chairs. My legs. I'm gonna do my legs. It's gonna default to I only have one bin in there. And so now I can save and close. If you had serial numbers turned on for your receiving, which I strongly suggest you do if you're going to use serial numbers, you would have to put in this case, 60 serial numbers to identify the pieces that you're receiving in. So now I've received those chair legs for that. So that's kind of how this nice part of this works. And then if I have an item receipt and I go to enter in a bill, it will tell me, hey, you've got an item receipt sitting here for this vendor. Do you want to make this bill be that item receipt? You say yes, again, automatically populates. So it's a big part of that, but this is so important, because if you are not using the items on that bill, you will never increase the quantity on hand of these things right here. So that is so crucial that you do. Big thing too that I want to show is that assemblies. If you have assemblies, you have to build them. So you have to come into here, you have to build your assembly. What I have here is I have that I'm trying to build those 15 chairs that Chair World ordered. Problem is, I don't have enough quantity on hand of stuff. So notice that for my arms, it tells you I have 46 on hand. I need 30. I'm good. My chair back, I'm good. My legs, I'm now good. Oh, my seats, I have a problem with my seats. Well, I will tell you that I have an open purchase order on those seats. Labor, not a problem. And I have screws are not an inventory part, so it's not going to hold up this build. So what can happen is I can build this. I could sell these chairs. The problem is I've not really built them in QuickBooks because I didn't have enough. So you have to be very, very careful on this and make sure that as you see these happening and you finally do get in those chair seats to finish off this build, that you come back and finish that build, because you have got to pay attention to this pending builds report. It is very, very important. So I want to make sure that you do that. Also notice that I had different warehouses and bins for all these other pieces, and now these assembled chairs are going to go, and I'll show you the journal entry here. It takes things out. So it took these goods at their average cost out of the materials inventory account, added the labor cost, added the material cost, and now put these 15 chairs back in to my finished good inventory with that burden of labor and screws and what the average cost was. So that's kind of really important about builds. And then invoicing. Invoicing is how you take things out. So, you have a normal invoice where you're selling a client. And notice that in this group case, I sold the group, which was the cushion and the cup holder. The client, you can choose whether they want to see that group, all the individual items, or whether they just want to see one line. That's your choice when you set up the group. So this invoice is just your normal invoice. It took my inventory out of inventory, put it into cost of goods sold. I got my sales price for my cup holder, my sales price for there, created the AR. Notice that this transaction here is for my my group, my cup holder, and my cushion. So this was the effect of that journal entry that the invoices did. The next invoice I wanted to talk about is a zero invoice. So in this case, I gave Chair World 10 cup holders. I wanted to make sure that my job costing for Chair World reflected those cup holders. I also needed to get those 10 cup holders out of inventory and into cost of goods sold. So what I did is I did a zero invoice. I'm not getting any revenue for this, but that way I could then get this tagged back to the customer, and now I've got a credit against my inventory and my job materials, which is where the cost of these goods were going. So think about your inventory life cycle. The other thing was that I had received an item in inventory and for a repair and had moved it all through inventory. And now I wanted to get that repair back out to the client. So I could either invoice it to them at $0 if it was warranty work, or I did work on that chair. So now I'm going to take that chair that I took into inventory of theirs, and this is more for bigger cost items, things like that, that you want to track, especially if there was a fire or something like that. But now I can I can get that repair item out of my inventory and at the same time invoice them for the labor of that chair. So all of those pieces are put back together. It's a great way to track all of that kind of thing. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is inventory adjustments. Be very careful when you do inventory adjustments. Make sure you do the quantity and value. That way you can see the dollar amounts. But what you have to be very careful of is that you have to make sure you pick in the right sites. You also have to notice that it's very confusing on the screen. This has quantity on hand. So I forgot what Joe had. I better not do Joe. Okay. There's my arms. I've got 46. I'm going to make my quantity 42. Let's say we messed up 2 arms. This is the problem. You have to know what the new quantity should be, not what spoiled. It will calculate the difference, give you a value on that. we'll also give you a recap down here on the bottom. And because what happens then is, I'm going to save this, but when you come back, the screen doesn't look like you did it before. It actually just shows you the result of the difference. So that is why you need to be very careful. Inventory adjustments, people use inventory adjustments probably more than they use invoices and bills. And the QuickBooks program's meant to use invoices and bills for the most part. So you have a smooth, even flow in your inventory cycle. Inventory adjustments should be a one-off thing. So just a big part of that. Reporting, you've got a lot of reports now with inventory. You can look at it, if serial number's turned on, you've got lots of serial number tracking in here. I deal with a lot of appliance salespeople, and you want to make sure you put model numbers and notes and serial numbers, because if there's recalls, you can use your QuickBooks items to come back and and very, very quickly do a report on a Whirlpool 9625 model, see who all bought that, see who all bought it during a certain time period. Right there, you have the mailing list to contact them to get the warranty work done. So make sure you don't have like a generic item. I have got people that do that too for inventory as well. But there is a lot of reporting. A big one that is really good to use is you've got the inventory stock status by site. That will give you all of your different warehouse sites, tells you if you have quantity on hand, what's available. I have people with problems with inventory all the time, and I will come in here and I will see negatives in here because they did an invoice and they took it out of the wrong warehouse site. They weren't paying attention. There was a message that popped up that said there wasn't enough in that warehouse, but they ignored it and moved on. And then you'll have negatives down here and you'll have positives here, and you can have definite problems with your inventory then. So just run through this real quick. You can look at it. If you have, when you turn on, also make sure you turn on that negative inventory, but if you didn't, there is now a negative inventory listing report. I was good, I didn't go there, but you can make sure then that you've kind of managing your inventory. You'll get a groove on in terms of what reports you like to see. Whether some reports are too busy, some aren't. You can decide, what you want to see. This is basically turned it the other way, where the sites before in the other report were down and the item is, you had other information there. Now I've just got my items and I know where they're at. So, but it doesn't tell me the bin, it just tells me the warehouse. So, and also I can hide my zero quantity items very quickly. I could isolate a warehouse if I wanted to. There's my bin too. So you can play with this. You can do all of your inventory sites. There's my finished good. I don't have any on hand, so I'm in bad shape. So there's a lot of reporting on that. So, all right. So Jen, I think what we're going to do is we'll let you do the next polling question, and then we'll have Osita give some information about our Fishbowl partner and what we could do next if Enterprise is not robust enough for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I will run the next poll. And this question is, what version of QuickBooks has the most inventory functionality? There's Pro, Online Plus, Enterprise, or Premier. So go ahead and click in your answer for this poll question, and then we will hand it over to Osita. I'm really excited to hear his little explanation about Fishbowl inventory. I know they are one of our partners that we work very closely with. So again, if the QuickBooks option isn't enough, like Vicki said, that is a great option that you can go to as well. So I'll give another couple seconds for the poll. It looks like just about everyone is saying QuickBooks Enterprise. And I think that's the right answer, right, Vicki?
Yes, it is.
Perfect.
Pro doesn't let you do purchase orders. Premier has some functionality, but Enterprise is where you want to be because you're limited. Pro and Premier only let you have total lists of 14,500 entries. Enterprise, I think, is 10 million or something like that. And if you try to do inventory and you do it correctly, you'll outgrow Pro and Premier very, very quickly.
Absolutely. All right, so I will go ahead and close that poll. And Osita, do you have?
Just come back to mine.
Come back to you. Okay, perfect. All right.
Let's flip through real fast. Are we there?
Yep.
All right, let me search again. Osita, you want to introduce yourself and I will get to the your slide.
All right, thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Osita. I work together with Vicki, and we just help people out who need the help with getting their QuickBooks on track and really taking advantage of the opportunity that Fishbowl can provide when you want to take your inventory to the next level. I think it's been mentioned a little bit here, but what Fishbowl does is it basically takes complete ownership of the inventory process and really lets you manage it on another level compared to what you can do inside of QuickBooks. Really, one of the great selling points is that you have the ability to really put a structure to different stages of order management. So it's not just as going as far as receiving inventory in with the bill, but you can create the purchase order, receive the inventory, and then reconcile the order separately. You can create the sales order, actually pick and pack the inventory, and then manage shipments. And then there's a whole slew of integrations that will let you connect to if you have like an e-store platform that you're managing orders through. If you have a shipping contractor who you need to get rates from, there are a whole bunch of options there to integrate those platforms into it and really track those processes. In addition to just being able to really structure out your workflow, there's some really advanced features when it comes to bill of materials and to manufacturing and warehouse management. We have a really nice location-based setup that'll really let you capture row shelf bin across multiple locations if you need to, and it really just it kicks it up a notch as far as how you'll manage and organize your inventory and report on that. And then that way you can have people who are focused on warehouse management, who are focused on bringing your inventory in and shipping it off. They can have access to Fishbowl and can focus in that area. And then your financials and accounting information can be separate in QuickBooks.
Awesome. Yes, we do a lot of Fishbowl work because people really, really need the next level on that. So if you find that you need to go into a more stronger direction with managing, especially the manufacturers, we definitely can help you out with that. So Jen, do we have any questions?
We sure do. So a couple questions that came in. Are there any coffee roasters that would use QuickBooks inventory? Is this the best methodology for inventory when it comes to like a coffee house or maybe even just restaurants in general?
That would be, you could use the advanced inventory because you got a lot of the problem that you have with coffee roaster. And I had a client actually, and your stuff, you basically have to create assemblies because your stuff goes from green bean to roasted bean to either ground or packaged in a bag. So you need to move it through your inventory cycle in QuickBooks, just like you would in that. And then, Osita, does Fishbowl add a better level to that in terms of food product?
When it comes to food product, there are some options available, but specifically, especially when it comes to potential like loss or during the grinding process, and especially with how you need to manage weights and other things like that. There may be some other options out there for a food processor. There are things that you can do, like you said, you'd want to be take advantage of the bill of materials in both products, depending on what you're doing, just so that you can have your recipes outlined and you can really track the conversions of product between stages. That'll be the important portion to track out there. But then if you deal with loss a lot, or when you're going through those different stages and you need to track that, there are some other options out there.
Awesome.
Excellent.
All right,
Thank
Jen,
you.
try stumping us.
Next question is, you showed an example for finished goods inventory and the assembly bill that included labor. Would that overstate your inventory value? And then kind of in a related question, I'll just send these both at once. When you put labor in the assembly, how do you get it out of payroll expense so you're not double counting your labor?
Okay, so it doesn't really come out of quote the cost of your actual labor itself. What will happen is you kind of set up a contra account or the same account where you're just rebucketing it. In this case, I just had an expense account. I don't have payroll in here right now. But the goal of that is the value of that chair now has the burden of that inventory, of that labor on that finished good. And I have clients that even put an overhead factor on that as well. So keep in mind, it doesn't change your P&L. It really just rebuckets those costs. So if I had my payroll account and I was doing my payroll and I had a cost of goods sold that was, warehouse labor, I would actually have this item going to that same account. And basically what it does is the labor is there. It's still in your gross profit, but now what you've done is you've burdened the cost of that finished good with the true cost of what it takes to make the chair.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, our next question is, any recommendations on unit of measure? For example, we 10 by 10 sheets and then break down into various sizes to sell to the customer.
That one's tough. I've had several clients that were sheet metal type, or they bought long strands of metal. We have to kind of work together on that one. You have to turn the units measure on, and we have to talk it through. The easiest example for unit of measure is I have a gardener that buys a trainload of mulch, and they can sell it, by the bag, by the truck, by the scoop kind of thing. So really that just requires a dialogue in terms of what is boiled down to for some of those kind of things is we just buy it by the foot and we sell it by the foot. But those are one-off discussions that we just have to see how your process is and how it works, because there's so many ways that we can do it. It just depends on what your methodology is, and some might work for you and some might not. So I'm sorry I can't answer that one directly.
No worries, thank you. Okay, is there a report to generate maximum monthly sales rather than just a monthly average?
Maximum monthly sales? Well, I mean, you've got your sale. I guess I would need more information on that one. Whether we're looking by items, customers, I don't know what we're looking at. Because you can slice and dice sales a million ways. So I'm not sure what actual sales we're talking about.
So he's clarified that he's looking by items, maybe?
Okay, so if you go to the sales report, there's a sales by item summary or a sales by item detail. So the summary, you pick a time frame and it tells you exactly how many quantities you've sold, for what amount, gives you the cost of goods sold, the average cost of goods sold, margin, that kind of thing.
Great. Thank you, Vicki. And that might be too something that is kind of a deeper dive. We can follow up after the webinar as well. Okay, as a seasonal farm business, we have Premier Manufacturing and Wholesale edition of QuickBooks, but not Enterprise. Is Fishbowl an option for us or only with Enterprise?
No, Fishbowl is an option for you. Basically, kind of the beauty of Fishbowl is that it can integrate with your accounting system because it takes complete ownership of the inventory, and essentially QuickBooks becomes your a general ledger for managing your AR and your AP. So as long as you have the accounting system, then Fishbowl can map to that. There are of course some limitations, but generally speaking, Fishbowl is able to connect with QuickBooks Premier, QuickBooks, or the advanced version of QuickBooks Online.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarification, Osita. And a couple people, actually quite a few, have asked to see the integration between Fishbowl and QuickBooks. And just so that, put it out there for the whole audience to hear, we are going to feature a webinar in the next couple of weeks that does show that, and we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper and talk more about Fishbowl. But if that's something that you wanted to see a little bit sooner, we will have staff available later this afternoon to kind of talk with you one-on-one and see what that might look like for your business specifically. So just addressing several people who are asking about that integration.
Yeah, we would need like 2 hours if we were trying to do both pieces today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just a couple more questions here, and then I have one more poll, and then we'll wrap it up. Can inventory assemblies be used for machines that contain parts that might also be sold on their own?
So your item list.
Oh, I'd say absolutely.
Yeah, I would say your item list always has to be the individual items to begin with.
Great. So yep, absolutely. Okay, perfect. And then last question, a little bit more specific to Fishbowl, is does Fishbowl keep the invoices in the system or do they remain in QuickBooks?
Excellent question. So actually, it's both systems. You'll manage your sale process. So from sales order to invoice, specifically the picking, packing, and shipping process will mark the transaction as ready to post to QuickBooks, and then it will create an invoice for you in QuickBooks. So you'll have the order data available in both systems. Depending on your preferences, you can have the order come over as a sales receipt if you process payments in Fishbowl.
Great, thank you. So it looks like that's all the questions. So before I run the final poll, Vicki or Osita, did you have any final comments or anything you wanted to close out with?
No, I think, hopefully this gave everybody some background. It wasn't meant to be an end all, but so many people are not aware of functionalities in QuickBooks. So that's what the goal of these talks are on Tuesday, is to kind of just give you a heads up that, there's functionality out there. If you're a techie, then you can figure it out. Or if not, we're here to lend a helping hand on all of that. So hopefully, we may have answered some questions that you had. And if not, reach out. We're here for you to take you to the next level.
Absolutely. And with that, I will launch the last poll, which is, would you like a team member from Out of the Box Technology to contact you about this webinar, what we talked about today? If you want to dive deeper into inventory, if you're ready and you need help and you want us to jump in there with you, just let us know if you'd like to receive a call or if you need some time to digest this information. We will have a follow-up email to this that has the recording of today's presentation, as well as a PDF of the slide deck and some information on how to get in touch with us in the future if you did need anything. So we hope that this webinar was useful to you. As Vicki said, kind of shed some light on the functionalities that QuickBooks does provide when it comes to inventory. And then if you needed to go a little bit above and beyond the solution that is available and how we here can help you. Vicki has an awesome team. We have a ton of consultants. Inventory is one of those beasts that either, like Vicki mentioned, you are tech savvy and you can figure it out, or you just need someone to help you navigate that whole landscape. So that's where we come in, and we're happy to help. So with that, I will close this last poll, and I'll go ahead and share my screen just with some contact information if you did want to reach out to us. There's our email, our website, our phone number directly. If after you've logged off of this webinar and you're like, wow, I need to talk to someone else about your industry specifically or your company, definitely reach out to us. As I said, we'll have some follow-up in the next couple of hours, in the next couple of days, with all of you who joined us to see how we can help. And we'll have a special offer for those who did join us today live. So we hope that we can connect with you. And thank you all for joining us today, taking some time on your Tuesday. And as I said, we'll have a follow-up webinar to this that kind of dives a little bit deeper into Fishbowl and that integration with QuickBooks. So keep on the lookout for that. Osita, Vicky, thank you both so much for your time. I know you're super busy and helping clients left and right, so I appreciate your time today to go over this. And we look forward to seeing everyone again next time.
Thank you.